That's right. I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail.
You can't stop me.
I'm going to win.
It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
I won't quit.
I'll just keep getting stronger.
Stronger?
Stronger.
Hey everybody, welcome to Barbell Research. We got myself, Dean Guido, and Jeb Johnston Stewart. Did I get that right?
Why do you put my middle name last?
I don't know. It sounds better. And then we got James Krieger, but I know you're one of the dudes that likes to be like, you need the doctor, so we got Dr. James Krieger.
Right. I think didn't Helms and Israetel give you the honorary doctorate?
Yeah, somebody did. I was like, I wish I could just, because I have 2 master's degrees, I wish I could just like trade them in for a single PhD, right? I should
like
be allowed to do
Voltron?
that. I did enough work to basically do a PhD, so it's like, come on.
Well, we have this new thing. We call it, like, instead of being a fit pro, we're fit bros. So like we've made up our own title as well, but like, to me, anyone who's like done the master's or a PhD, they're all doctors, just because it's like I didn't do that thing like with Greg Nuckols. I was like, oh, it's Dr. Greg Nuckols, even though it's not, but it's like, you might as well be like, what's really the difference? I know that will piss a lot of people off. Like, it's too massive. You're at school for like 10 years, you're a doctor. But more specifically, we brought you on today just because you released something on your Facebook in terms of, and I know you've been with Eric Salazar doing the weight vest stuff, but there was this new update essentially on some newer research into the weight vest stuff, not on rats and not on an underground study with a bodybuilder. And it was actually with real humans. And so that kind of got our interest because Jeb and I had, like, I've been researching high flux and a lot of your stuff, especially with our last Fitness Devil episode that we did, kind of informed a lot of the stuff that I kind of sparked and started researching. But anyways, so we wanted to kind of bring you in to do an overview of kind of what's been out there, the rat stuff, and then just kind of some of the implications, some of these strategies with the weight vest could have, not just on like bodybuilders, but on general population in terms of set points and losing weight and all these ideas that Jeb and I love to do and we do for work. But yeah, anything to add to that, Jeb?
No, I'm over here. I've got like the recent study pulled up on my phone and just kind of like readdressing it. But I think this whole topic is just super fascinating to me. I remember I told James before I was going to meet with him, we're going to be at Kansas City together. And I was like, just so you know, the second I see you, I'm going to corner you for about 4 hours about this weight vest thing. Because to me, it was one of those moments in my career, my life, that like a concept completely blew my mind. And what blew my mind even more was that other people's minds were not blown by it. So I think it'll be really cool to get like the inside kind of dish from James and let everyone know exactly what's going on.
Or kind of where it started in your brain.
Yeah. So I think like the way we start this off normally is like we like to define our terms.
Yeah.
And so, James, can you just give us, I think start with your experiment first, and then we'll kind of dive into the research around it.
Yeah. So it was interesting. Eric Lee Salazar, actually, he's the guy that came up with the idea. He came to me. And he's like, actually, he had left me some message, and he's like, I got this idea. You're going to think I'm crazy, but just hear me out. Just hear me out, and so he said, okay, I have this idea. I want to I want to, prep for this contest, but I had this idea of like wearing a weighted vest and maybe like kind of adding weight as I lose weight. So I just keep my external weight the same. And he thought I would just like piss all over the idea, but actually I was kind of intrigued by it. I thought, oh, I don't know, let's try it. Let's see what happens. So, so he started doing it. And the interesting thing that we started to notice over time was he wasn't, the prep was going like really, really smoothly for him. Like he wasn't getting like the increased hunger and everything that you typically get when you're dieting. He wasn't having like the temptations to binge, all these things. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And someone on Facebook had just mentioned this gravitostat research just offhand. And so I looked up the research on PubMed and found this this one particular research group that had done these studies on rodents. Because originally when Eric proposed this idea, I thought, well, it'd probably give you a little benefit in terms of energy expenditure. You know, you got more weight you're carrying around. I didn't think it would be a huge benefit, and I certainly didn't think it would give him any advantage in terms of appetite at the time. But then, Eric, I saw his feedback and stuff, and so started looking at this rodent research, and the rodent research was kind of fascinating. And basically, what they did is they implanted weighted pellets into the abdomens of these rodents, and the rodents just spontaneously lost body fat. To the point where their external weight now matched their original body weight. So it's like their bodies sensed the additional weight and adjusted it accordingly. And so then the researchers did a bunch of other experiments to try to figure out what the mechanism might be. And they came up with this idea of what they called a gravitostat that they hypothesized exists in the bone. And so basically the bone senses loading of body weight. And so when you implant these weighted pellets in these rodents, the bone senses the increased loading and then feeds back on the brain saying, oh, there's too much weight here. Let's eat less, basically reduce appetite, everything. And so that was the hypothesis behind the research, and it was actually very well done studies. Mm-hmm. But the big question was, well, does it happen in humans? Well, anecdotally, Eric's experience matched up, exactly with what had happened with the rodent. So that's how the whole thing kind of started. So see,
and that's the funny thing, because I thought you, and again, these story, it's like a bad game of telephone, but I thought that you or Eric went into the research, looked at these rats, was like, oh, I want to be a rat and do what they did. And then Eric went and inserted pellets in himself, but he didn't. He was like, I'll just do a vest. But it's totally opposite. He basically, this bodybuilder fit bro came up with this idea, and you had to go like back it up.
Yep.
That's awesome. So I think like, well, I guess
I kind of think this dives into some of the things we talk about too, of the people that we tend to appreciate and within our network, our friends tend to be people that are very evidence-based, but also willing to take chances to look like assholes. And I think this was one of those, like, you guys could have come out looking like just completely insane people on this one. But the chance you took ended up opening up within our industry this interest in research that was pretty kind of like, I mean, it took you a while to even find this thing, right? So yeah. It's, to me, that's like, I don't know, like, it's just, I think this is more evidence like, hey, we can't get too pigeonholed into only doing things because of the research. Like, sometimes we have to take the step out and see what works anecdotally, and then maybe find the mechanisms to back it up.
Yeah, definitely. It's, I mean, if you think about it, really, bodybuilders have been doing that for years. I mean, exactly. They've been doing stuff, now, not all the ideas bodybuilders had bore out in the research. Some of it turned out to be complete, BS, but a good chunk of it actually, was eventually verified in some way, So yeah, I think Eric was just doing something that a lot of bodybuilders have done, just, taking an idea and kind of running with it, and, that maybe had some logic behind it, you know.
And the downsides were pretty small. I mean, aside from his discomfort, but the guy's a bodybuilder. He's used to discomfort.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There was very little risk in terms of doing it. So.
Well, and the cool thing about it, and I know you talked about high flux in your article, but the cool thing about it is, and I don't know like we could talk about maybe the other end of things, but in terms of all the benefits, they all ended up being the high flux benefits, but then with weight loss added on to there and body composition change. So what's going on there?
Yeah. So when we talk about flux, like interesting, because I just wrote, I'm writing a couple, NASM has a new weight specialist course coming out, and I'm writing 2 chapters for it. And one of the chapters is on metabolism. And I just got done the first draft of the chapter yesterday. And actually one of the sections I wrote about energy flux, and, you know, and so energy flux is just the amount of energy that's going in and out of your body. And so like a low energy flux would be an example, like you're not eating very much, but you're also very sedentary. So your energy intake is low, but also your energy output or your energy expenditure is low. That would be a low energy flux. A high energy flux would be your calorie intake is high, but your energy expenditure is high as well. And in fact, this was proposed all the way back by Mayer in the 1950s that the human body does a better job at regulating its weight when the energy flux is high versus low. And there's, you know, research that's come out since that supports that. And so basically we do know that physically active people, their appetite regulation is more in tune with their body. They just have an easier time managing their weight. And then we also know that people who are maintaining long-term weight loss, nearly everybody that does it successfully has very, very high physical activity levels. So there's this idea that a high energy flux just does a better job in terms of body weight regulation. And so the weighted vest kind of helps you have more of a high energy flux, because like what we did with Eric is like, Eric, for most of his prep, didn't drop his calories much. Like we did an initial drop, and I don't remember where that was, maybe down at, I think we were at 2,100 or 2,300.
I think it was 2,100 the last, I remember reading that it stayed there for a while.
Yeah. Because normally as you lose body mass, right, you have to keep dropping your calories more and more and more. And Eric didn't do that. He kept it the same, but he just kept adding external weight instead.
Yeah.
And so that was also a factor behind why he wasn't getting super hungry, because he didn't need to do an extreme diet. Now, the last maybe 3 weeks, 3-4 weeks out, we got kind of aggressive on the energy deficit, but for most of the prep, it was, it was a very manageable calorie intake, and we were taking advantage of that idea of a high energy flux to have a higher calorie intake and a higher energy expenditure versus low. And the weighted vest allows you to do that, because obviously another way you can do that is just do a lot more exercise, like a lot of cardio and stuff like that. But the problem with doing a lot of cardio is, number one, you've got the interference effect with weight training. And then you just, you're in a deficit, and you increase the risk of overtraining and everything. So the weighted vest was kind of like a very low intensity way of increasing his daily energy expenditure without adding a huge volume of like aerobic and cardio and stuff like that.
That was one of the big things when like we presented in Costa Rica, but I did a high flux thing. I wanted to like look into the vest stuff, but it was just, there wasn't enough out there. And then of course the study comes out. But one of the big things I said, and Eric and Helms and I talked about, is like you've looked into the Hadza stuff, like the Hadza tribe. Essentially they were studying like how much they moved in their hunter-gatherers, but a lot of their flux stuff, they couldn't feed themselves the calories. It's kind of like the bodybuilders doing those end stages, and then all the other stuff started dropping off, like immune system and HPA axis and all that shit. Where like the vest, if you have the food, it almost seems like it blunts that dip into there, but it's the same results in terms of body composition, which is crazy, because I don't know.
What did bloods look like after? I mean, like in comparison to a normal, like I'm sure he does bloods after like a normal prep and sees, and I think it's also very important to note that Eric is a natural bodybuilder. So there are all of the adaptations that you're going to get, he's going to get, like, seriously.
I don't remember. I don't know if he did all his blood work. I know he did his testosterone at one point, and his testosterone did dip, but it wasn't like extreme. And I don't recall exactly where it dipped to. But that's the only thing I kind of that I can remember.
Yeah, I remember him posting something, and I agree. I think it was something where it was like it was a dip, but it wasn't terrible. And I even think he might have posted thyroids that they didn't even look super bad. And the thing was, I think he recovered really, really quickly afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. He was feeling good. Like, I mean, most competitors coming out of a contest, they're binging and all that, and he didn't have any issue with binging or anything. Like his recovery was phenomenal.
Which is crazy. And maybe this is something like, because I was actually interested in this. I don't know if you guys covered it. Like, I know you covered a little bit about workouts, but like my thought was like, you put more energy into the system and you can use the energy better. Was his workouts better as the weight lowered? Because generally that's like one of the things that drops off is like workout performance and just like eating the gym.
That's the other thing. Yeah. He maintained his strength really well through the prep. Like better than he had in the past. His workouts felt pretty good for most of the prep, and so it just seemed like there were just benefits all around to him.
Do you think it works the other way around? This is the one thing I talked with Jeb about, and like I don't even know, because it's like no one's really doing it. If you're trying to go up in muscle mass, but then kind of keep your energy flux higher, do you think like workout performance would be better just because you're jamming more? Like it would be more carbohydrates, but do you think if you're jamming more in there, you could almost have a better top end because of high flux, as opposed to if you were in low flux but then trying to get bigger?
That's a good question.
It's a brain fuck. That's why it was hard.
Yeah, I don't know. That's one that's hard to say on that one. Yeah, I don't know.
Because that's what I wanted to originally research, but there was like you've looked into the research, like high flux wasn't even a thing until it was like G flux, and then it was like you said in the 50s, it was just body's better at regulating. Like no one really talked about it, so no meatheads have tried the other way around. I don't know.
I don't know. That's one I don't really know. So
I think the whole thing about this is this idea of the thing that really threw me for a loop is the idea that we're using it, because I think what a lot of people got hung up on was it was like this external weight. And the thing that blew my mind so much was that, yes, it's an external weight, but there's an internal mechanism that's regulating the body based on what it perceives the mass to be. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, and then now there's some like things that we've come across where I think Tommy Wood was talking about one of the studies where they with I guess it's gastric bypass, and people who are type 2 diabetic come out of gastric bypass and they're no longer type 2 diabetic. Like, I'm wondering if there's other mechanisms throughout the body that are therefore somehow interconnected to this kind of idea of this gravitostat. Like it really opens up a whole realm of potential things there.
Yeah, I know. It's so hard to say. It's like, I would like to see some independent research groups look at this, because it's been all pretty much the same group that's been doing this right now. So, so it's always good to have some confirmation from other labs. Yeah, So, but we'll have to see.
Well, and another thing I think you highlighted too, so anyone listening is like, oh, I'll just put a vest on, but it worked better if you moved, like, because like if you're sitting down all day, like and we know that steps are important, but it's kind of like it's like a catalyst to that if you're moving more, because if you're not, you're just not really fighting gravity, you're just sitting.
Yeah, that's the thing is you need to have that loading on the bone for it to work really the way it's supposed to. And so, yeah, if you're sitting most of the day, it's probably not going to work as well as if you're, someone standing up, moving around more. Like Eric was, I mean, he's got his gym. He's constantly up and moving around. He's rarely sitting down. So, So that's probably another reason why it worked so well for him.
Because I just see a bunch of people hearing this, they're just like looking into this stuff and is like, I'm just going to wear a vest, and then they're going to think more is better, and they're not going to move, and then they're going to have like, they're like, if a 100-pound vest works, I'm going to use a 200-pound vest.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I get out of control. Like, it'd be interesting to see the upper end of this thing, because even with the rats, it was like 1, 2, and 3 gram pellets. But like, I don't know how, like, then there's all these other things that come into play, like, was too much, and then how long can you do it? Because we don't even know the length of the adaptation.
Yeah, Eric really, that's actually what I want to emphasize too. Eric really eased his way into it. So like, he started with like, it was just like a 10 or 12-pound vest, which is not a whole lot, you can't take like a 50-pound vest and just throw it on, because it's going to feel real heavy. You're going to get a hell of a lot of fatigue, Eric, over time, what he did is he slowly built up to it. So he started pretty light, and then he slowly added the weight over time. And I don't remember what he eventually ended up with. It was a significant amount of weight, but he had built up to it, so it wasn't causing him, a ton of fatigue as if you had just jumped right into a bunch of weight to start with. So,
yeah, and I think too, we also have to point out that the limiting factor is actually the vest itself, because it's not like he was putting it on for his walks. He was putting it on for the entirety of his waking hours.
Yeah.
Well, that was where so like when I was like initially like looking into this after we talked, I was like, the Army would be the best place to look for this shit. And like, they didn't look at it at all. They just looked at injury rates, and I was like, they had like the best subset of people that were all wearing vests that like kind of test all that stuff, and like they didn't do it at all. So this stuff's like really hard to find.
Yeah,
there's a problem. So my brother's a special forces operator, and they do a lot of really cool research, and he's like always talking, like do a lot of HRV stuff. And he said the big problem they have is they can't release a lot of it because no one's a volunteer. So it's a non-voluntary subset, so it skews results. So like they'll research it, but it's not publishable, and they don't put it out. But yeah, you're right. Like the Army is like a great, and I'd be interested to see what, like over long term, if that, because if we're saying the gravitostat thing resides in bone, and we know that, resistance helps with bone density, is this a potential, help for, osteopenia or any kind of like bone density issues?
That's a certain possibility. I think that's a distinct possibility for sure.
Well, and that's where we kind of come into these, like the reason why we bring people like you on is because essentially we're looking at all this stuff, and we talk about evidence-based, and then I would say like logical jumps and mechanisms, but there's not a lot of people that put that on the line enough to go try it or say it, because they feel like they're just going to be ostracized for saying something like that, right? But like it's like, how do we evolve to get those things? Because that's a good question, and that would be an amazing answer if it was just wear a vest, like a 10-pound vest, and like eat more food.
Yeah, I know. And like I said, we just need more human studies, and fortunately, at least they're starting to emerge, but we need a lot more human stuff to kind of figure that out.
Well, maybe we go there. So can you kind of, I know you just did a research review, so anyone who's kind of like interested deeper in this, is it out yet on your?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the May issue. I covered this study in the May issue. So
let's maybe go like an overview. So we talked about rats, and it worked. We're like, oh, this is the best thing ever. But like no one really got excited because it's rats, and evidence-based hates rats. And then so you did like a secret study, and Eric is now a human rat. But really it was his idea. The doctor didn't come up with the idea, but like what's happening now? So they evolved this into an actual human model. So can you kind of give us a base overview of that, even if it's not that much different? But I know there was some nuances in that were different.
Yeah. So they actually, it was a pilot study done on some individuals with obesity, and they had them wear basically a weighted vest that was equivalent to, I think it was like 7% of their body weight or something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And then they just basically tracked body composition, but it was a really short-term study. I want to say 3 or 4 weeks. And what was interesting is similar to the rodents, the individuals who actually, they had two groups. Both groups wore weighted vests, but the one group basically was like a control. The weighted vest that they put on was so light that it wasn't really much of a weighted vest. But anyway, so the group that actually had the 7% loading of weighted vests, they experienced spontaneous weight loss. It wasn't a huge amount, but of course it's only, you're talking only over 3 or 4 weeks anyway. But it was a significant drop in their body weight with no change in diet. Like, they didn't actually prescribe a diet or anything to these individuals. They did kind of track their calorie intake. They used what are called food frequency questionnaires, which are very, very inaccurate. So I don't really trust that data anyway. But they did show spontaneous weight loss. It was something like about 1.5 kilos. So about 3 pounds maybe over 3 or 4 weeks, with no change in diet. It was 3 weeks, no change in diet. Actually it was 11% of your body weight. Sorry, not 7%, 11%.
Still pretty good.
And they were like a BMI of like 30 to 35, right?
Yeah. So these were individuals with obesity, and it worked, at least over that 3-week period.
Well, I think the argument some people might make is like, oh, well, you're giving them the weight vest, and so they're thinking they're on some kind of nutrition thing. They're obviously going to, but we see the low load lost not even, they lost like 1/4 kilo. Like, they didn't even lose like, 1/2 pound. So even the kind of, nocebo effect, it wasn't, it was clear that it was like something about this external load is driving this.
Yeah.
Did they look into hunger with that one? Because that was like the big thing with high flux that I picked up on, is like, you take away all the results and whatever, like it worked, it didn't work. Like, they weren't hungry. Like, they didn't. Unfortunately,
I wish they had. They did not do appetite ratings in this study. So
that could have been a proxy for high flux, even just to kind of know.
Yeah. It would be interesting to do like maybe like a metabolic ward study where you actually have tight control over people's food intake, so you can really monitor their true food intake. Because it wouldn't even need to be a weight loss study necessarily. If you're just looking at mechanisms, you could do a 2-week metabolic ward study and have some people wear a weighted vest and other people wear, obviously a placebo, or just like a weighted vest with no weight or something.
Yeah,
and then just track let them eat ad libitum, right? But since they're in a metabolic ward, you can actually track exactly what they're eating, right? And actually see, do they spontaneously eat less? That would be a real, fascinating study.
Because they did that with the high flux one, right? Like, that's what they basically did. They did that period of low flux and then high flux. I think it was like, I want to say 3 days, but then they would let them eat. But I guess they controlled the food, so there's no ad libitum. But you can kind of deduce, if they're not hungry, they're not going to eat, so they're going to eat less, or they're going to, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like something simple.
Yeah,
I know it's not.
I'd say that the population we're talking about here was probably eating ad libitum. They're not going to go hungry for the sake of a study. So I think that's even more of kind of a flag to plant there.
Yeah.
Well, there's another thing too, and I think this is where, like, you're the best at this. So there was a part in the rat study that they kind of possibly, you could change your set point, which I know, like, there's going to be a big argument over whether set points exist or not, but like, what's going on there? Because that seemed to me to be the biggest implication, is like, these vest periods could end up being a long-term, not reset, but like, your brain might take a hold of that.
Yeah, there is one rodent study where they removed the weight, and I'd have to go back and look. But the effects seem to persist even after they remove the weight, which would suggest that perhaps there was some change in the set point. But it's only like one rodent study, and it'd be interesting to see if that would actually occur in people or not, or even more rodent research, you know.
Yeah.
So
with a pilot study like this, so like, and is a pilot study designed because they like just want to prove something so that they can go do more research? Like, is that kind of what's going on?
Kind of. It's like it's done kind of as a proof of concept or something, and then basically sometimes you use pilot studies to get more funding to do bigger studies, you know. So yeah.
I guess so Jeb and I, like, just for some context, like obviously we work with Strong U and general population nutrition stuff. I'm starting to like look at, like, we've looked at like high flux and like how that could be a longer term solution for this stuff. Where does the vest fit in, like, in terms of like concepts of like how can you start to apply some of this stuff, knowing that like the research is limited, but it works? I don't want to make that logical jump, but I mean, kind of.
Yeah, I think definitely for competitors, I think it can be a very useful tool. I think there's, obviously we still need more data, but I think there's enough evidence to suggest for competitors, because definitely it is probably worth a try. You know, and plus competitors are used to making themselves uncomfortable anyway and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So for Gen Pop, it's, you know, even though this study that just came out suggests a benefit, the question is, how sustainable is it in Gen Pop? And if you stop wearing it, do the benefits persist or not? And that's really a big question, because, you know, if the benefits don't persist, you basically would have to wear the weighted vest like indefinitely to, you know,
or changing calories, which is like pretty fucked up. Well, like that was the big thing, is like,
you know, I could see you though, for example, perhaps you use it kind of as a jump start type thing. I mean, it's no different from, let's say someone goes on a low carb diet, right? They have no plans on going low carb for the rest of their life, but you know, sometimes going low carb and starting low carb gets you jump started, gets things moving. And then you gradually reintroduce carbs over time. And so, you know, I could see a weighted vest maybe possibly having a benefit there, where you use it for a period of time to kind of get the snowball going. You know,
that was like, so like the getting people like, and this is where like, so Lou Schuler, he's like, I wrote about this in like the early 2000s and stuff, and he said one of the big things he didn't write about but thought, or like kind of found, was like, maybe this high flux thing is like obviously dependent on genetics, but some people just have a really hard time like getting over that hump to get their body to trust it enough to be in high flux. And like maybe, and I was like, well, maybe this vest could be like the high flux pack. Here's what high flux is, and your body can kind of gravitostat the shit out of itself, but get into high flux enough to know what that is, to then maybe take it off. And because like getting into high flux is kind of hard if you're not used, like people can't just go from sedentary to high flux. Like there's a process.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's just, it's one of those things where, you know, if it's not too uncomfortable for someone, you know, because there's that issue too. It's like, you know, again, for it to be a benefit, you got to wear it a good chunk of your day. And so the question is, you know, how sustainable is that going to be for some people, you know? So
I was thinking, like, my question falls into this idea of like less about pushing the high flux and more about this idea that, you know, if we can manage to lose weight without dropping calories, do we then prevent some of those metabolic adaptations from taking hold? And therefore, when we get to that lower weight, can we therefore maintain that at an easier cost? And again, then we have almost that high flux without driving it through upping calories and driving activity even more.
Yeah, that's also a certain possibility. I mean, you know, ultimately, I think though, for individuals with obesity, you're still going to need to do dietary change. Like I can't, certainly the weighted vest is not going to be a magic bullet, because I don't think you can add enough weight to to really make a significant, I mean, it'll make a
Deficit.
dent, but not like a huge dent. I mean, eventually, you know, even if you stabilize at a lower weight, chances are you're still going to have a lot of weight to lose, which is going to require some sort of dietary change. So I feel like it's a tool. It's another, for me, it's another tool in the toolbox, and it may even be definitely for competitors and possibly for Gen Pop, and depending on the situation. I think it can be possibly a good tool, but obviously it's going to be, you know, dependent on the individual and everything.
Well, that's why this stuff,
as a concept, like as a conceptual idea, I think is where it holds so much power.
Yeah.
Well, because I look at it as like I just want to test it out, but it's like hard to test it out ethically, right? So like, when do you use it? Do you use it at the start to put them in the high flux, but then really, like you said, you have to drive, like they have to lose weight, or maybe do you add it in at the end of that journey to then continue weight loss? Because that's initially what high flux was researching. Like, is it better long term than what we kind of have been doing, which was that eat less, move more concept, and it outperformed it easily. So it is a tool, but it'd be nice to know like where you can use it. You know what I mean? Like that's
I think in both situations you mentioned, you could use it in either situation. You could use it to get someone moving in terms of their weight loss, or you could use it, you know, over a period, like, you know, let's say someone's been losing weight for a long time and now they've hit a plateau and they're just struggling, right? Maybe it's a plateau buster, you know?
Because that would have been like the overfeeding studies, like, because like the people I found that have like responded to high flux, we'll call it whatever, like upping calories, like they tended to be the people in that study that were like high responders to that. And I wonder like if the vest could make people a high responder, because like, you know what I mean? Sometimes you add calories and people don't up their metabolism. And I look at those people as this, they need to kind of have that push, but there's nothing on it.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I just, yeah, I don't know.
We're like,
so I think like kind of in the lines of that like idea of like plateau busting though, I think we can kind of continue this a little bit in that when we kind of pull back and we find those people, like you said, who we normally would say, okay, well, like, let's raise calories for a time and see what we can do here. Again, and I know we talked a little bit before we came on air, but this idea of how long do metabolic adaptations last? When do they start to really kick in? You know, is it, you know, we hear a lot of talking about like diet breaks and the efficacy there. Because what was that? Where they did the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off diet breaks.
Yeah, that you're talking about the Matador study.
Matador study, yeah.
That's why you bring you on. You got
right.
In your head.
So we saw that, or we see a lot of times people talk about like, hey, you know, you diet for 12 weeks, then we go through a 12-week maintenance phase or whatever it might be. But we talk about people with severe, you know, what do we say, like, you know, higher levels of obesity, where the bigger concern is really to try to get them down into a lower weight, and those metabolic adaptations, like, at what point do they really kick in? And like I know that we had talked about, you were on another podcast, and I heard you talking about how it looks like those adaptations last, at least in bodybuilders, are lasting a year and a half later. We can't really afford to put this person back into a caloric surplus for a year if they already are dealing with obesity. So, you know, I think this kind of idea of like, of where do we go when we can't lower calories anymore, but we've noticed that adding them in isn't really a benefit.
Yeah. I think the weighted vest could be, like I said, yeah, I think it could be a useful tool in a situation like that. You say, hey, let's try this. You know, we're not going to change anything else. We're just going to add this, you know, and you see what happens. And
I think a physical adaptation sometimes is a little bit easier than another psychological one at that point, where it's like, oh, I'm going to have to eat less, or I have to walk more. It's like, hey, you're just going to put this thing on.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. You're going to do everything else the same. You're just going to wear this now. So
and that's where it's like hard. That's why like I wish they would have looked at the hunger with just adding the vest in, just as like a proxy for that, because it's like, if you're not hungry, especially in like we talk about the psychology stuff, like if you're not hungry, they probably have a better shot than the person who's hungry at the same calories. And it's like, I wonder if just adding the vest makes them less hungry, just like walking more could do that. It's like, fuck, why don't you just ask them the question? That one would have been an easy one. They could have just had like, even this questionnaire.
Yeah. Are you hungry?
Yeah. Like, are you hungrier than you were like when you started, or blah, blah, blah. Like, fuck. But I guess they needed funding. But that would have been a better one for funding, I feel. I don't know. Because I guess, Jim, where do you want to go with this metabolic adaptation one? Because like this is like we have your time, and like this is like something that we've been kind of toying with, like in terms of.
Well, I think it all ties together. So I guess this idea of, because we are in the nutrition sphere, and because we deal with clients, you know, that are long-term dieters. Obviously, there's the issues that come with metabolic adaptation. I mean, I know I've had some of my toughest things to deal with is like trying to pull women who come to me that I'm like, they're clearly suffering from, you know, basically red S and like, you know, working not too hard and dieting. And it's like, okay, we need to just increase calories. But this idea of like, okay, well, if we know metabolic adaptations last, at what point can we ethically start to work on a fat loss phase again? Or is it okay to continue with that in these times? I guess more like, what do you see as like some bumpers or some guidelines that you would look to in those situations?
Me, generally, I'm not too, given that the metabolic adaptations do seem to last, I don't see any issues with trying to diet again because they last anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, and remember, a lot of the adaptation happens in the NEAT component anyway, which is something you can at least
control.
You can kind of control at least. And so, you know, I think for me at least, I'm not too worried about the metabolic adaptations because at least the one aspect where
drop off
that is the big driver is the one you can kind of control anyway. You know, to me, that's generally probably shouldn't be a driver of decisions. To me, I think there's more of a big psychological component. You know, for me, it's like if someone is just losing adherence because they're just tired, you know, I think that's where breaks and things like that, or not continuing to push, I think probably has the most benefit, you know. And will it benefit metabolically? I don't know. There's debate about that. It's certainly not going to hurt, you know. So.
Yeah, I mean, like when I first heard you say that, I was like, okay, because a lot of my bells started dinging, and I was like, basically, I just asked that question to confirm my own bias. But I started thinking about that, and I said, you know, like, what is the big rock here? Is it like, what's more important here? Is it losing weight, or is it the fact that maybe they're going to move a little bit less now that they did? And cool, well, you know, we went from sedentary and obese to sedentary and overweight. So now let's start, you know, tracking things like steps and adding in a component there, and we can start to at least, you know, turn that volume up a little bit. Knowing that these adaptations are going to last, and then, like Dean said, hopefully when we get to somewhere where we're in a happier and more steady state, we can start to add in energy on both ends even more.
Yeah,
it just sucks because like when you talk about the psychology of like even with red S and stuff, and that's like why I brought up the Hadza stuff, because they literally couldn't feed themselves and they had to go walk to get food. So they basically fucked themselves by like going to get berries. But these people that have weight loss have like chosen to eat less, but they're still hungry. It's like, maybe if we just systematically raise some of those things up with calories, it's just a hard sell when you've been selling the diet more, complex, because you basically condition them to like think that that's the only way. And that's where it's like, maybe like, have you found anything not ethically, but a way you can kind of work people down without kind of pushing that concept enough to know that maybe they need to come back up? Because that's what gets lost in this whole long-term weight loss thing, is like there's only one way, and then we preach only one way, but then we forget about like, hey, what do we do after?
Yeah, for me, it's just like, I just have to coach people a lot on, you know, for example, if someone's been been on low calories for a while and I'm trying to get them to up their calories. It's like, you know, they're so afraid that they're going to like balloon up and everything. And for me, it's just like, a lot of times I'll just run a bunch of numbers for them and basically try to show them that, look, it's impossible. I'll tell them at the most, you might get a little bit of water weight back maybe, but I feel like there is a big psychological barrier there. And for me, it's just a matter of trying to talk them through it. And that doesn't always work, so.
So as a statistics guy, do you collect more numbers? Because it's funny, because even though you're like a big stats guy, like when I hear you talk about weight loss, nutrition, everything, you talk so much about the soft skills.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't really keep like on my clients. I'm not coaching much anymore anyway, but I don't really, I've never really tracked the numbers on my clients as a whole, right? I just look at each individual and just, make the adjustments when necessary, but I've never really tracked the clients, and mainly just because I feel like it's, unless you have like a really, really large client base, I feel like I wouldn't get any meaningful data out of it because there's just too many differences between clients and their goals and their adherence to draw anything meaningful from trying to aggregate all that data together,
Yeah.
So.
Plus just how how reliable is the data to begin with.
Oh, yeah,
right.
Yeah. Oh,
because we know a lot of times the numbers we look at, we're like, yeah, okay, we'll take that with a grain of
and that's
salt.
why like we bring that up, because there's like, let's just talk about adherence or like tracking and whether that's accurate or not. But there's some proxies to this stuff, like you said, like hunger. Red S has all the they can't lose weight. They feel like shit. Like there's all these things as proxies as coaches you can look out for, and then maybe have a solution or tool. And that's where it's like, I just want to know like where's this best tool? And it's just like, it's too early, but it's cool to talk about the possibilities of it. It's just, how do we start to test them, assuming that these studies are going to take a while? Like that best study took, like, that was like 4 years. So was the next one coming in 4 years?
Yeah, I don't know. It takes a long time to do studies. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize that. I mean, just how long it can take to do one study, because you go through the process of getting funding, then you got to, get your subjects, you run your data collection, you collect your data, you analyze your data, and then there's a process of submitting it to the journals. And, you write it up, you submit it to a journal, and then it may come back, and then you got to revise it and resubmit it, or maybe it's rejected, then you got to submit it to a different journal. I was a reviewer on this one meta-analysis a while back, and I was that pain in the ass reviewer that people complain about. But I've done a lot of meta-analyses, and so there were a lot of problems in the way they had done it, and I had a lot of patience with them, like, because I could have just rejected the paper outright and just said, no, you guys, this is just no good. But I kept kind of coaching them through it, and literally, like, it was back and forth for over a year just in review, until I finally approved it. And even the editor of the journal was like, you went way beyond beyond what any reviewer would do, especially because as a reviewer, you're not getting paid to do that, so. Was
that Mike Israetel? Is that why you got in a fight?
Yeah.
Is that what happened? Is that the true story?
Assaulted him on a plane, I believe.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there. Okay, so let's actually, I know that you don't have the answer completely, but let's say Fit Bro Meathead wants to use a vest to get bigger. What, conceptually, just, I don't even care, how would that work? Because that's basically my question. And then
to get bigger.
I think that if we look at high flux, that's my concept. I think if you wanted to get bigger, The only negative of high flux is you have to eat more. So obviously that sucks.
Yeah.
But could you be leaner and bigger and use the vest to push that? And then we'll go the other way.
Possibly. The only thing is, though, is I don't know. I don't think it would impact. I think it would just make things harder, because really, I think a big chunk about the weighted vest is just appetite control. And so you're kind of artificially suppressing your appetite when you need to be eating more. I don't see any benefit from a muscle building standpoint. So I think if anything, and I could be wrong, but I don't see how the weighted vest could be a benefit for someone trying to bulk and get bigger, unless you're someone who has a problem like eating too much when you're bulking, and then maybe, maybe you need to scale it back some, and you just, and so maybe the weighted vest might help keep things under control.
Do you think that there's an upper carb limit? Because like the way I look at it is like, maybe you could, like, if I have to eat like 4,000 calories to even gain weight, probably 4,200. Maybe I could eat 5. Would having that extra amount of carbs, even if it's going through the system, would be being more efficient at taking in things through the system? Would that possibly help lifting more volume? that you don't have an answer to that, but
I don't think so, but
okay.
Yeah, I can't see any mechanism how it would help, but
that's good, because I asked Mike T. Nelson. He could basically just ask. I just want to know, because I was like, can I hack the system?
He
Mike
was
T.
trying
Nelson
to
was
get
like, I
bigger
don't know.
without eating more. He dieted for 2 weeks, and he was like, that's it. I can't handle this 3,500 calorie bullshit. I don't know how you guys live.
No, but like, so other end of spectrum, meathead, already got bigger and wants to get leaner, but doesn't want to deadlift less. Because Eric kind of went through that, but he was doing bodybuilding stuff. But could that on the higher end of things help drive that? Because I know even if we look at psychologically, like people when they're cutting, their performance drops. Like let's just look at like dudes that want to get big. So Jeb and I and you obviously. How would you go about using that and adjusting volume, or would you?
I probably,
because it might not even be worth it. Like that could be the answer too.
Yeah, I just don't see it being worth it in that sense, So, yeah, I can't see any value out of that. But
see, and that's why no one's getting excited in the fitness world, because they all want to use it on themselves. They don't care about their clients. Like really, right. They say they do, but they're like, how do I get leaner? And then you basically just crushed all the dreams. Yeah. But now we have to start looking altruistically, like how could this help the high flux thing? Which means you have to actually look into those topics.
It's like I told you. It's like I told you before. You could. Why don't you just combine the weighted vest with like your special diet and you call it the Guidogenic diet? Like it's like
but that was when we were in Costa Rica that you posted that, because I was like, this is genius.
but then now, so that's I guess possibly the application of this thing. Like I think like when Jeb and I heard it, we're like, oh my god, this could be the thing. But maybe it's not the thing as much as it is the psychological tool to drive the behavior change. I just don't know if that, again, will that help long term? And maybe the fact that they aren't hungry might help it long term without telling them that.
I think so. I think it'll be highly individual, but I think so.
Well, I think if I'm in biomedical engineering, this is where I'm spending my money.
Well, and the reason why,
if you can figure out that gravitostat and you can manipulate that somehow in the human body within the bone structure, you've got a procedure that can make people lose weight without doing anything.
Well, because we had Gabby and Shannon Beer on talking about intuitive eating and comprehensive coaching, blah, 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 blah. But like, it seems like high flux has a better payoff long-term in terms of just intuitively not fucking gaining weight. So like, how do you, like, could the vest do that? Or like looking into that shit, like basically I'm looking at how do you convert people to high flux? Cause it seems to be a better answer. Sort of. It just the negative is like you have to actually move and do shit.
Yeah. It's
and the vest makes you move less, because I think like as a society we're moving less.
Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, I don't know. Because now you're diving deep into the psychological weeds, you know, and like, you know, you know, now you're talking about like behavior change and everything, and even adding a weighted vest is, you know, definitely like a behavior change, you know. So
right. And that's
you know,
another thing, is potentially adding, you take somebody who is willing to wear a weighted vest for 10 hours a day, they're very, very internally motivated to reach a goal. So then we're also talking about, there's a whole other aspect here that we didn't even dive into.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's like good to start conversations like this, because it'd be interesting, like if someone listened to this, if they start putting together their kind of way of using it, because like you said, it's still in its infancy. And the rat thing, I don't think that they were looking at it like, how do we get trainers to start adding vests to their nutrition clients and all this shit. But the application could be huge. It's just, it's so early. That's why we're asking conceptualized questions, because you're the only one that's really talking about it, which blows my mind.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, because I thought there would be a lot, you know, when Eric first did it and stuff, I thought there would be a lot more talk and stuff about it and more people wanting to try it. And, you know, it's been kind of interesting.
I had a competitor who was training for a contest, and she ended up, it was her first contest, and she ended up dropping out and not really wanting to follow through, which was fine. But even in the preliminary, just like 5 weeks, you know, being able to maintain her caloric load a little higher, she got leaner. I mean, you know, it's totally appearance based, but it appeared like she was gaining muscle in the process. I mean, just looked incredible. And I was really hoping we were going to see it through, because we had about 18 weeks prep, and I was like, man, this would be great. But we didn't get that far. Yeah. But you know, I anecdotally, I think I've seen a few other people talking about using it, but I haven't seen anyone really go all the way.
They use it for rucking. So like Martin, one of our coworkers, he uses it for rucking. Every time he's in a cut phase, he'll just like start rucking with it. It's like they end up doing the same shit. It's like this stuff has been done, and people are kind of using it as their tool without even knowing why. And that's why I wanted people to be excited about it. Wow, I don't know why they're not excited. Maybe because it's not that good. That could be the answer.
Well, I think with like rucking too, it's just becoming an external load on an activity, whereas
on walking.
Whereas but it's also, it takes NEAT into exercise activity almost, because you're adding that like load. Yeah. So like for me, like the bigger thing that I was so interested in was the fact that it's creating a greater daily energy expenditure based on an internal mechanism. And I think that's what I wanted everyone to get really excited about. Mm-hmm. And when no one did, I was really disappointed.
You ruined it, James. Like the way you presented it to the world, it screwed it up somehow.
Or Eric's arms are just so big that it negated everything else. Yeah.
And his quads are huge.
I mean, I get irritated every time I look at him. I'm like, God damn, that physique.
Okay, last question. Because I get into art, and you might not even know this one. So again, Jeb brought it up, which kind of thought about it, but like this idea of like treadmill walking, whatever, but like walking desks and treadmills and NEAT. Does your body, like, because the reason why like all those longer term cardio things, your body just gets efficient at it and burns less, but doesn't seem to do that for actual NEAT and walking. Like, what's going on there? And does that same concept apply to this walking desk? Because I almost look at it as an activity where your body knows what's going on. It's going to figure out a way to do it easier. And so like those 10,000 steps don't count the same as like actually doing 10,000 steps.
I don't think so, because I think any increase, if there is any increase in efficiency, it's not going to be enough to make up for I mean, if you're doing enough walking, it's not going to make up for the volume that you're doing, you know? So even if your body becomes more efficient and maybe expends a little bit less energy per step or whatever, you're still expending a fair amount of energy that you wouldn't have if you weren't doing it, you know? So, you know, so I don't think that's too much of an issue.
So walking damn it. I wanted you to say like walking is better than walking on treadmill.
Just it's however you do it. I mean, James Levine did a study using those walking desks, mm-hmm. and no change in diet, and a group that did the walking desk just like 4 hours a day, they end up losing like maybe 4 pounds or something. Not a huge amount of weight, but you know, with no change in diet, that's still, you know, pretty impressive. So
That's sweet. Okay. Jeb, do you have any more? We're just like firing. We're like, fuck this. We're just going to ask all the bro questions.
No, this is great. Like, honestly, this is like kind of what we wanted to dig into, man. We'll save proton leaks for next time.
Yeah. Well, we basically just wanted to like I said, we got excited and we read all your stuff, but it's more or less like no one's talking about it. So I was like, we'll just go right to the source to ask all these questions theoretically. Like we'll kind of figure like there'll be more stuff that comes up as we go, but it's going to take too long. So I wanted to like test all these hypotheses and hopefully does that even make sense? Hopefully someone tries and is like, no, you know what, Dean, it does help you get bigger. I did it. James is stupid.
Well, I think also too is like the whole purpose of this like podcast is to like try to expose research and our whole thing is like adding context to myopic issues. And I think something like this, like people look at NEAT, they look at walking, they look at these things as very myopic. It's just like, oh, this is what you do. And it's like, well, hey, like, yes, we can base on outcomes, but let's then go back and look at the possible mechanisms so that we can recreate these things or at least understand why these things are happening. I think too often people play in either sandbox of like, hey, let's just go with the mechanistic stuff or let's just go with outcomes and let's ignore the others. And I think it's so important to see that even someone like you sometimes comes and says like, okay, let's try this and then we'll find out why it's working.
Yeah.
James is like, I've done that with everything. I just didn't tell anyone. this whole metabolic adaptation thing totally didn't.
We should also point out that Eric did get his IFBB Pro card after that as well, which is
true.
Another if anyone needs a real selling point, that's the one.
Yeah, you should have led with that. Like, vests give you pro cards, and then maybe people get excited.
Yeah, that's the jump.
Okay, let everyone know kind of what you got going on and where to find you. Again, this is like a separate podcast from the Fitness Devil, so we might have some different people listening to it. So I know you have your review, but kind of plug all the stuff you need to and let them know where to find you.
Yeah. So you can check me out at my website, weightology.net, WEIGHTOLOGY.net. And I've got a research review and the study we just talked about just now, I reviewed that study. I review about 8 studies per month. And so, yeah, there's also lots of free like articles and everything. I just wrote the 10-year anniversary piece to my insulin series, so, but yeah. And then, but yeah, that's where people can check me out. So
also Fit Pro Financial.
Oh yeah. So I've got a project working on with Chad Landers called Fit Pro Financial. And because a lot of Fit Pros just kind of struggle with their finances, I mean, when it comes to either budgeting or even like retirement. I mean, most personal trainers don't know nothing about even planning for retirement. And so we've got a cool thing we're setting up there, and you actually can go to fitprofinancial.com and sign up for our email list. We got some cool stuff we're planning for that. So,
and you got t-shirts, it looks like, possibly.
Yeah, just 2 in existence right now, but we'll eventually have more. So
by the time this gets released next week, it could be a big thing.
There could be a third. There could be a third t-shirt released.
Cool. Thanks for coming out, buddy. This was awesome. Hopefully we'll collect a bunch of questions about this and try to prove you wrong and then get you back on. But like, we'll definitely have you on to talk about just try to confirm our biases. You basically confirmed all Jebs and then
I'm good.
Told me I'm an idiot.
That's right. I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail.
You can't stop me.
I'm going to win. It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
I won't quit. I'll just keep getting stronger.
Stronger?
Stronger. Stronger.